Yeah, dude, Ryan Miller
Dan.
here in Portland, in a makeshift setup at the Ace Hotel. It could be a lot worse.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, I've been a fan of your stuff. I mean, even just your Instagram posts over the last couple of years, dialing into your playing. And I was thinking about like driving down here and being here yesterday, thinking about what it is that appeals to me and what I would love to talk to you about. And one thing is, how do you write the stuff that you write? And also, there's a thing about your music that I enjoy, which is it's like full on, pretty much front to back, and which is there's a lot of music out there where there maybe is a moment of that, and it's like the 20 seconds of a song or something that I'm stoked about. But I love that your stuff is just like it's like a Prius where the gas pedal is stuck down and you can't.
Yeah. Well, no particular formula other than, just trying to connect the dots somehow, stringing together pieces, fragments of tunes, whether it's trying to get to, this one riff that you wrote that could be like the coda and then like filling in the spaces from there, or a chorus, or something like that. But ultimately, I think it comes from a place of a very punk state of mind, I think, and trying to just capture someone's attention while you have it and make that meaningful as it can be in that time. And ultimately, I think that has been powerful for me as a listener in the past, and I hope it has been very meaningful to me in shaping what I think music is and can be. But at the same time, not trying to fatigue people. That's certainly something that I think about a lot, both in volume and then in aggressiveness, or maybe tone
Density.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's an escape. It's a place where you can sort of build that environment, and let people escape into it, let yourself escape into it. That's really, really powerful for me.
Well, that gets to, like we've hung out a little bit, and you're a pretty chill guy, it seems like. And I can relate, because I'm pretty laid back, but music is a channel for catharsis.
Yep.
And so, but it does make me wonder, what's the internal world like that gives birth to that crazy stuff?
Well, I think it comes from a lot of just players that inspire me, music that inspires me. I think at a very early age, early time in development of my playing, I've been inspired by a lot of that type of music, a lot of math rock, a lot of prog music, a lot of very dense jazz, chamber jazz, through composed music. And so some of it comes from a place of trying to engage in that conversation a little bit, and also do something different and unique. I think that's a big part of it too.
So when you're writing a piece, you have like a nugget of something that is just interesting, and then you're trying to sort of push it out in either direction from that. Is that, do you do that by just exploring on a guitar, or you use other methods to write? So a lot of improv, a lot of exploring, a lot of just noodling until something starts to make sense, and then it becomes sort of mechanical. Sort of operate in that zone a lot. Eventually there'll be something that comes out of a practice session, whether it be just this one 5-second snippet, or a 10-second thing or something like that. And then just it's important to write it down right away, because if you didn't have enough time to make it burned into your memory and get the mechanics down, then it can shift the next time you pick up the instrument. Of course, everyone experiences that. I think that
So it's important for me to write it down, and I use the computer primarily for that.
Okay.
To get things written down just verbatim. And,
are you programming things in, or doing notation?
Notation,
okay.
Programming. Use a lot of the program Guitar Pro. It's super simple program. I think pretty decent sounds for what it is, and it's really easy to use. I've used other programs in the past. Used Ableton where appropriate. But yeah, that's a big part of trying to finish a tune, or maybe like finish a composition, or a section of music or something like that, and then from there taking those bits and pieces and expanding upon them. I've sort of been operating in that sort of cadence for a long time now, and I've gotten really used to building whole pieces like that. But that's just my own music. That's the music that I make at home. I don't typically play that music with other people that much. It's sort of just like my own way to expand upon the, I think, language of the instrument and how it is meaningful to me, and then progress forward in my own playing. So, something's really challenging. It took you a long time to build up to it, You've been playing this part for weeks, you've got it down. Ultimately, you want to just like document it, and that's like really important in terms of benchmarks and making sure that you're progressing. I think but that being said, that's also sort of set me back a little bit tonally. So actually right now, being that music is not necessarily super tonal.
In terms of sound?
Right.
Yeah.
And so right now I'm sort of in the process of undoing a lot of what I would consider maybe, I don't know, years of playing atonal music or chromatic study, whatever that means,
Right.
Both to myself and others, and trying to recapture, my love for the guitar at the same time. Ultimately, I want it to be I want music I play to be meaningful to myself and, to an audience,
Yeah.
So I think it's good to always make sure that what you're saying, not just, what you say and how you say it is relevant to people.
Right.
And in particular, that's why I like things like the Instagram community, or YouTube, or, what used to be, I think, SoundCloud, is just hearing what people are up to,
Yeah.
And staying relevant, I think, is really important. And also contributing to the conversation, I think, is ultimately important to me.
What does relevant mean to you?
I think relevant to me means that, I don't know. I mean, it could be any number of things. I think mostly it means that what I'm doing is staying interesting and is meaningful to the conversation that is happening. Maybe it's not necessarily moving forward, but it's, if I don't have anything to say, I won't say it. It's like I think the environment of musicians making music is a conversation, and speaking up, is scary, and
Sure.
And ultimately, I think can be like embarrassing sometimes.
Sure. I mean, I think you
And,
couple that with the pressure to speak, to have output, whether that's just I haven't posted anything on Instagram for a week or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So if I want to say something, if I feel like I have something to say, then I think that it might become like a musical thing or something like that. And then in terms of just like, what is this day and age, like the contribution that can be made in a unique and impactful way on the electric guitar. That's, my instrument that I play. I think that it's, staying inspired and hearing what people are up to and trying to, contribute in a meaningful and impactful way to that conversation is something that I think, strive to do. So I think that's what I mean by, staying relevant and contributing.
It's not necessarily like putting out a bunch of neo soul videos or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
not that could be something that you explore down the road.
Maybe that sounds kind of cool. I don't know. I don't know that I don't know what's happening there. So
I think I was thinking about there's a inherent pleasure in finding something, even if it's mechanical, a repeating pattern, that's difficult, and getting it to a place. It's sort of meditative, even if it's intense.
Yep.
And then I hear a lot of emotion in your music that it's almost my sort of internal connection is almost like Jackson Pollock or something, where you see work that's not overtly about something, but contains a lot of energy or feeling, or and it you almost don't. It's not literal in the sense where it's like a landscape or a portrait or something, but it contains so much of the artist's feeling and energy that it transfers. That's how I feel about your music when I listen to it.
Oh wow! Well, well, that's a huge compliment. Thank you. I guess that ultimately, music is an escape, and so maybe if it's something that, like one of those things that you're working on for, many weeks or months, and it's a minute long thing, or just a composition, like lines of notes that you put together that make sense somehow to you. I think that I get very lost in that process, and put a lot of, I guess, emotion into that process. And I also find myself getting lost in a lot of similar music, a lot of black metal, a lot of math rock, a lot of prog music, a lot of improvised music, a lot of fearless exploratory music. Not to say that my music fits in that zone, but I get lost in that stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it be someone, whether I'm listening to like Pharoah Sanders or someone with, Alice Coltrane, like celestial chops that just like consume you and wash you over,
Right.
I get very lost in that process and sort of try to, I guess, replicate it in some manner, like however I can, because ultimately that's really meaningful to me. And again, goes back to like trying to contribute to the conversation and in a way that inspires me and hopefully others.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And there's, I think there, as an artist, there's an inherent, you see or hear somebody else do something,
Yep.
And if it connects on a deep level, then there's an inherent desire to like manifest it, or you pass it through your filter, out into the world. And that's one of the amazing things about creativity, is that it becomes this like relay race almost of from whomever, Alice Coltrane to you to me to the next person, and like a game of telephone, something that's gone through 12 iterations and it's unrecognizable, but it contains the DNA of the thing.
And sometimes it's like not even a relay; it's just like constantly happening. You can't escape it.
Right.
And so that's definitely, I become very scatterbrained at certain times, and constantly thinking about that, like, whatever hour that I'm gonna have, like at 11 p.m. tonight to play guitar, or something like that, or maybe I'm gonna wake up early before work or something and try to play for like a half an hour or something like that, or somehow try to get like maybe 8 to 10 hours in a week. Like, how am I going to piece this together? Like, I know that I need to do this for myself, So running all that stuff in your head.
You're running back. You're like doing logistics for yourself,
trying to make that hour that you have that day like as impactful as possible. And whether it's just like practicing those mechanics, or working on a tune, or practicing just so you don't sound like shit the next day at a gig or something like that. Right. So
that's funny because I've never been a good practicer, which is probably why I've ended up in a scenario of just, for my own music, doing improvised music, because there is no, it's maybe it's a crutch, but there's no benchmark of success or failure.
Yeah.
Well, but is that something that is that diligence something that comes naturally to you, or?
I think so. Yeah. Especially with playing a lot of through composed music.
Right.
Playing those riffs for hours becomes important at a certain point. Otherwise, by the time you come back to it, it's gone forever. And so that's why it's really important for me to program it into the computer, whether it be tablature or notation, so I can come back to it and leave myself sort of like a breadcrumb trail, so to speak, on coming back to the music again. I guess, for example, some of the solo music that I play is exactly that. It's, if I don't play it, if I don't practice it, then it'll just be gone.
Right.
If I go back to it like a year from now, it's like, what was like 2018 me thinking when I wrote this? Like, this is so dumb. Like, why did I do this to myself? Like, I should have like kept playing that and somehow refined that repertoire or something.
There are people who have the most unbelievable recall.
Yeah.
Though, like, I've spent some time around Mike Keneally. Are you familiar with him? He is this unbelievable musician who played guitar and keyboards in the last version of Frank Zappa's touring band.
Okay.
And he's a freak in the sense that he plays guitars and keyboards almost equally well, and sometimes simultaneously. But he toured with Zappa, and you can still say, like, hey, will you play the difficult section of Inca Roads or something like that, and he'll play it on either instrument. Black Page, I've seen him shred Black Page on a toy piano, which was a very out of body sort of experience. But it seems as though maybe his physiology is just wired slightly differently, that stuff, he's played it so much, it's just kind of built in.
Yeah, that's a tricky zone to be in. I can't imagine. I'm definitely not a sponge. I have to work it out.
Yeah.
You're like, but that Zappa music, I mean, is crazy. I think I saw some interview where, I forget who it was that was talking, was recalling a line, and they said, they played it for the interview that was being given, and I didn't notice myself, but they had, I apparently had missed a couple notes, and they said, one missed note for every year I've been away from this music, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I think is definitely valid.
Yeah.
It's something that I think about. Yeah. But yeah, ultimately, just practice a lot. Really simple, mindless stuff sometimes, and other times trying to focus in on just getting hands to work together, and just the mechanics sort of burned into the fretboard and to whatever thing I'm working on. And ultimately, I think that's a majority of my playing. Actually, this is maybe kind of blasphemy, but I don't actually plug in a whole lot. Most of my playing is electric guitar unplugged, just sort of by nature of, I've always had roommates, I've always, needed to be quiet or wanted to be quiet to a certain sense. So I definitely vibe on a lot of the just unplugged resonance of the electric guitar. And I really like playing electric guitar unplugged, which is definitely a weird thing, but I really like that sound.
Well, I think that goes into an interesting place. because I think you can discover a lot about tone generation by playing unplugged.
Yep.
Because getting an unplugged electric guitar to make a pleasing sound is not very easy. There's not a lot to work with there. So but also, the amp is it's the other half of the guitar instrument equation. But what bridges the gap there for you? Obviously, you don't just play unplugged. So
basically, it's trying to capture that same resonance and that same impact that whatever thing you were working on unplugged, and try and just maintain that. I guess I don't know that sound, in an amplified manner. It's sometimes challenging, and sometimes I feel like I'm making accommodations, sort of. Like I wish I could just be playing like an acoustic guitar or something, but I played like loud music with a loud drummer, and so from there, it's sometimes with playing aggressive, maybe punk or punk jazz or psychedelic music that has a lot of notes. Sometimes it's just being heard. That is the biggest challenge for me. The band I play in a lot, Yusko, we all sort of fight for our sound, even though we're just a trio. Very aggressive bass tones, very like loud drums. So I have to like live on the bridge pickup, a lot of treble, and so it's like some of that I sort of make accommodations for just needing to be heard, and so then that, whether in my subconscious I'm thinking about that when I then approach anything that I'm playing, so it's like or anything that I'm going to contribute to that specific project. So it's like I know that this one thing isn't really going to be heard if I play it, so like I probably shouldn't, like that one like sweep or that one way that I approach that note is just going to get lost anyways, so why not just like play the one note rather than the 5 or 7 or something.
That's like that's like an arrangement mindset. The flutes aren't going to be toneful in this setting.
So that's something that I think we all think about. That music in general, that band is very utilitarian. We all write together. For better or worse, it takes a really long time. Music can be kind of dense sometimes. Other times, it can be very, very driving, very, psychedelic, loud, heavy, all stuff that I think, we enjoy a lot. I think to a certain extent, that music is just really fun and really, really meaningful to us. We've been friends for over 10 years at this point, and we've been a band for about 7 or 8 years. And at a certain point, we're just friends making music together, and so that's I'm just very thankful for that.
I love that camaraderie.
And I've lived with all those dudes at certain points in our lives, and our lives are very like interconnected. John and I, bassist in that band, we both work for Stumptown Coffee. We both work together. We spend a lot of time together, so we appreciate a lot of the same music and a lot of like complementary music in a lot of ways. So it becomes a very fun and exciting conversation that we have with each other when we're playing music or just hanging out.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's like a gift to have a relationship like that.
And Phil Cleary is an anomaly of a drummer. He's just so incredible and thoughtful and humble at the same time, and just so good. And it's like if I could like sort of just meld all of my favorite drummers together, I think it would be Phil. And I really I love playing with Phil. He's really incredible.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
We also have like a kind of an interesting collection of instruments floating around. It's like a Friends of David Torn Appreciation Society.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have some stickers made up or something.
Cool.
Maybe some badges, iron-on badges.
I'm into that.
Well, first of all, like not many people actually ever get to put hands on a Tao.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about this guitar and how it came to be in your possession.
This guitar is the Tao David Torn prototype T-Bucket. John and Serge at Tao are some of the most incredible, masterful guitar builders I've ever met. I love those guys a lot. I talk with those guys a lot. I previously owned a different T-Bucket, and that sort of turned into a friendship with them in a really cool way that I wasn't expecting. And some like thoughts about that specific guitar turned into a subsequent purchase of a different guitar of theirs, and then sold that guitar. And then they mentioned that this guitar had been with David for a while, and he'd been digging on it, had done some modifications to it. But yeah, ultimately it's a pretty insane take on David's work that he's done to, I guess, expand upon the design of an electric guitar. I guess in the most basic sense, for me to explain what David has contributed to the electric guitar, it feels kind of ridiculous because it's so vast.
Right.
It's got all of his stuff. It's got the tornipulator. It's got it's got the the back route on the trim, which is great and really amazing. For me, I have a really heavy right hand. So it's very sensitive, and that's been a new challenge to learn this system. I guess I'll also just kind of talk about the top is washi paper. It feels crazy. It feels like a book or something.
Right. Well, even this is some sort of like rough.
It's like hammered copper or brass. I don't actually know. I'll have to ask those guys. The pickups are really cool. The ribbon foil, Benedetti ribbon foil, designed specifically for Tao. I think they've done these pickups in maybe like a dozen guitars at this point. Really cool. Share some DNA with gold foil pickups, but they also have a lot of PAF type fundamental tone to me, anyways. You can split the coil. Coils are mismatched, so there's not a whole lot of loss in volume, which is really cool. Ultimately, I like this sound a lot. Spanish cedar neck and body. Ultimately, you just like feel the guitar vibrating in a really unique, inspiring way.
Well, I think it's what's fascinating to me about their work, and particularly that sort of textural stuff that they do, beyond being visually beautiful and having this sort of wabi-sabi thing to it, is that when I play their guitars, it really changes the interaction with them, because they don't feel like even a guitar with like a nitro finish, where it like has that sort of shiny, slightly grippy feeling to it. Like this, it just doesn't feel like a guitar. It feels like you're interacting with some other object.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think anyone that plays an instrument a lot, it becomes a part of your like everyday environment.
Right.
You're like sitting with it for hours at a time sometimes, and ultimately you learn from it and want it to inspire you and want it to be the vessel for all of this emotion in your life. And I think that I have really gravitated towards the few that I've been thankful to hang on to and to play. those guys also are just like really nice.
Yeah.
And have been a pleasure to talk to, both about just my own journey in falling in love with the guitar and like what's important to me as a person. Like that's not something that like people have ever like asked me before, really, especially not like a luthier. And so that's been cool, especially from folks that I admire so much, just from loving the craft of, you know, guitars and you know, building guitars, and just like working on and fixing guitars, because at a certain point that becomes really important to any guitarist, I think. And so, yeah, I really appreciate the relationship with those guys, and ultimately this guitar is incredible. And I think, yeah, it's got a lot of really cool stuff, you know, a lot of brilliant playing and brilliant design that has gone into it. And, you know, I think it's really special to be hanging on to it.
It's just beautiful too. It's a beautiful composition.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen a lot of photos of this guitar in progress, and it's like mind-boggling how it ended up getting to the final place, you know, like the amount of forethought, everything from, you know, just subtracting a little bit off the top so that the paper could be here, and, you know, making sure that like the forethought to get the pickups right before that happened, and you know, getting this pick guard, like it's kind of a pick guard, but it's also just like
it's inlaid,
hammered copper that's inlaid into a paper top. It's crazy.
Maniacal.
Yeah. And like I've opened it up and I've looked at the stuff, you know, and further mind-blowing experience. Yeah, I'm thankful to, you know, to have it and to play on it, and you know, ultimately be a steward of this instrument is really cool. It's got these crazy tuners on it, which I know you know about. And that was kind of an experience, pretty frightening at first, 3-string, the linear string pull, and I don't know from like a geometry level like how that plays into the tension. I haven't like studied that. I would imagine David has, because I think ultimately everything's break angles, and David, I think, has gone down every avenue on that, in that regard. But yeah, it just feels great. It's really resonant and really responsive. I love the way it sounds. So.
Awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And thank you for talking about music and life. And
definitely. Likewise, I really appreciate the opportunity. So, yeah.
Sweet, man.
Thank you.